Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Chof Vav Amud Aleph, starting with Chof Hey Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. The Gemara is speaking about now an orchard and that is not made for residential purposes. In other words, it's a karpef that is greater than 2 saw. And over here, there's a discussion as to how to then misakein, rectify such an orchard. Says the Gemara, Hahu avarnka dahavale leresh galusa bebustane. There was an avarnka. I'm going to explain this Gemara according to the way Rashi explains it. That there was a avarnka over here refers to that area that is a big tree that brings a lot of shade in the middle of an orchard. This was a type of tree that was planted by Sarim, by different types of royalty, in order to then gain shade during the summer days and get refreshment underneath such a tree. So this tree was then underneath the orchard. Omar le Rav Huna bar Chinana le Abid martakanto de lemachar nechol nahamo hasam. The Reish Galusa says to Rav Huna bar Chinana, he says, make a takana, do something that will then allow us to then mesakein this area, because we know it's a karpef, so that we can go ahead and bring bread to eat underneath such an area, the arvanka, on Shabbos tomorrow. Ozal ovad kana pochos mishloisha. Rav Huna bar Chinana then made an enclosed area on one corner of this orchard, and he enclosed it with reeds that were less than 3 tefachim apart. In other words, he made walls of lavud. Why was he doing that? This was in order to then make it so that now it's going to be a residency. He's going to then have a residential area within this orchard. So then he'll put food, and the shomer will then sleep overnight in this area, whereby it'll then misakein the entire orchard, so that the orchard will now be something that's considered to be used for residential purposes. Ozal Rava, on top of Chof Vav Amud Aleph, Rava went shalfinhu, and he pulled out those reeds, those kanim that he made out of to make a enclosed area. In other words, Rava felt that this is not a good tikkun that Rav Huna bar Chinana made, so therefore he pulled out the kana. Also, Rav Papa, Rav Huna bereid Rav Yehoshua, naktinu mibasrei. Rav Papa and Rav Huna bereid Rav Yehoshua, subsequently, they took those kanim in their hands and took it away, so that Rav Huna bar Chinana would not then re-establish those kanim. L'mochar eisvei Ravina l'Rav. The next day, Ravina then asked on that which Rav Huna bar Chinana did as a support for Rava. And he said the following, Ir chadasha moididin lo moshivasa v'yeshana mechaymasa. A new city, how do we then go ahead and measure? We want to talk about the tchum. So normally the tchum requires 2,000 from the edge of the city limits. But he points out over here, if it's considered to be a new city, whereby the walls were already put before there was even a house, so then will then be moeded the 2,000 amos from the house. However, if it's an old city, then will then moeded from the city limits. Again, Ir chadasha moededin lo mi yeshivasa, from where the people dwell, but the yeshana, the old type of city, mechaymasa, will measure it from the outer wall. Ezu chadash ve'ezu yeshana. How do we define a new city and an old city? Chadash shehu kafa ulv'soif yashva. A new city is considered to be that which was first encircled by and enclosed by a wall, and then people then dwelled inside subsequently. Yeshana yashva ulv'soif hu kafa. And an old city is where they first had their dwelling, and then they were circling it with a wall. And this also is like it was mukaf, enclosed first, and then had people that were miyushav in it. In other words, that which Rav Huna bar Chinna then made this enclosed area in the corner of the orchard, that was after it was already enclosed first as an orchard. So therefore it would be invalid. Omar le Rav Papa le Rava, our Papa brought another kasha on Rav Huna bar Chinna to support Rava. V'homa Rav Asi mechitza is adracholin lo ishma mechitza. Walls that were made by builders. Builders want to get shade from the sun, so they would build temporary walls around them while they're building. Alma kivan de letziniuso avida lo havia mechitza. The reason why it's not considered to be a mechitza is because all it's doing is then hiding themselves, in this case, from the sun. So too, just they're hiding over here as well. It's a temporary thing, hiding themselves from the outer part of the wall on a temporary basis. So this also is not a valid wall when Rav Huna bar Chinna set up this wall around the shomer, because it's only for the night and for the day, but it's not considered to be something that's going to be kavua. Rav Huna bereid Rav Yoshua l'Rava, and similarly Rav Huna bereid Rav Yoshua brought a kash on Rav bar Huna bar Chinna as a support for Rava. A mechitza that's made just for storage purposes is not going to be a good mechitza. Rabba Baravua, he took and made an eruv over the whole area of the city of Mechuzah. Arsaiso. In other words, by neighborhood. Mishum Paira de Beituri Vaha Pira de Beituri Kimechitza Asur Lenachas Damya. He did this because if you take a look at the way that Rashi has the diagram, over here you have Mavoyis on either side where the public is going through, and on the other sides you have Mechitzos are there to be Shomer. Rashi writes the shomer garinim, because the peri de turi, that's the ditches that were dug in order to then put the pits of dates for feed of the oxen. So even though you have walls on either side, it wasn't sufficient to close up the mavois, and therefore he had to make an eruv to then close up each shchuna. So we see over here the same thing. Over here, the wall, the temporary wall that Rav Huna bar Chinna made was also not sufficient. So it says over here, Kari alayu reish galusa. On that reish galusa, therefore, brought the following pasuk from Yirmiyahu: Chachamim heimo lehelra ulehetiv lo yado. The Chachamim, they are making bad, meaning to say they are coming to oiser, so that they prevent me from then using this area underneath the tree, and to do good, to find it het there, they did not know. This is the version that Rashi brings in his Perush, and then he brings the Gaonim that he says is Yasher in his eyes, and is the Iker Perush. So I want to now go back and explain a entirely different way of explaining the Gemara according to the Gaonim. Says the Gemara, Hahi Avarnka Davale Reish Galuso Babustine. Now here this Avarnka is described as being a certain type of hut or tent, a structure that was made in the middle of the orchard. And this was there to then, people would then go and they would sit inside of it. They would take off, let's say, a garment, and they would then relax underneath in this area. Omar le Rav Huna bar Chinna le Abid martakanta le mochar nechol nahamo hasam. The Reish Galusa instructs Rav Huna bar Chinna to then make a way to Mesakein, so that we can go from our house, which is then between the house and the place where the avarnka is situated in the middle of the orchard. So in order to then do that, make some sort of takana. Ozil ovad kana pasuach v'pachas mishlosha. What he did was he made a pathway between the opening of the house to the avarnka that was less than 3 tvachim of reeds apart, making then this pathway, enabling them to then walk to the avarnka in the middle of the orchard. Ozil Rava came on top of Chavav and Aleph, Shalfinu, and he pulled out the reeds, the kanim. In other words, he felt that it wasn't necessary to make such a pathway because since you have this avarnka inside in the middle of the orchard, that itself is going to be sufficient to be made for residential purpose, whereby even though the orchard is more than 2 saw, you can go ahead and freely walk within the orchard. Also, Rav Papa Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua Naktinu Mi Basrei. Rav Papa and Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua, they took these reeds so that Rav Huna Berei Bar Chinana would not go ahead and reinstitute this shvil, this pathway, once again to the middle of the orchard, because it was unnecessary. However, Lamachar, the next day they realized that indeed what Rav Huna Bar Chinana did was correct, and that what Rav Rava did was incorrect. In other words, that you do indeed need a pathway, and that which Rava then uprooted the kanim was a mistake, and certainly what they did by taking away the kanim was certainly a mistake. So they said the following: Lamachar, the next day when they realized they made a mistake, Eisvei Ravina l'Rava. So Ravina asked Rava, who then was the one who then uprooted the kanim, and he said, Ir chadasha moidedin lo miyeshivasa v'yishana mechaymasa. He says that in a new city, we measure the 2,000 amos from the yishuv, whereas the old city we measure it from the chayma, from the wall. Ezu yechadash ve'ezu yechashana chadash shehu kafa luvesoif yashva yeshana yashva luvesoif hu kafa. The new city is defined as that which first had a wall around it, and then there was a yishuv inside of those walls, whereas the old city is considered to be that which was first with a yishuv and then was encircled by walls. And this also was the same. In other words, in the middle of the orchard where you put this avanka, this itself was considered to be already encircled by the walls of the orchard, and therefore it was first hukaf ulavasar posach, by then putting the avanka in the middle, so therefore it's invalid. That's why you need the pathway that was originally set up by Rav Huna Bar Chinana. Omar le Rav Papa le Rava. Rav Papa now asked another question on Rava. Ve'ha'amar Ravasi mechitzas adrachalin loishma mechitza. Those mechitzas that the builders make to then provide themselves from shade, so that they wouldn't get sun to be beating on them while they're working, are not considered to be a valid mechitza. Al makivan de litzni usa avida lo loich havina mechitza. Since they were concealing themselves from the sun, they were hiding from that sun using these walls, which is only a temporary time while there is a sun shining on them. Then it's not a mechitza. Hachanami kivan litzni usa avida lo havi mechitza. Similarly over here, since these walls, meaning to say the avarnka. Over here, that was in the middle of the orchard, was only considered to be concealing themselves while they would be there temporarily. So therefore, was not going to be considered to be a valid type of wall, and therefore is not mukaf ledira. Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua l'Rava, and a third question that he asks on Rava, Ve'omar Rav Huna mechitza ha'asui lenachas lo shemech mechitza. A mechitza that's made for storage purposes, that means it's only temporary, is not a good mechitza. The Horab bar avu me'arev lo lekul mechuzah, he had to make an eruv for the entire area of mechuzah, arsaisa, arsiyasa, one neighborhood after another neighborhood. Mishum peiro de beituri, because the ditch that they dug in for the pits that they would feed the animals, the oxen. It was only a temporary type of mechitza for storage. In other words, to guard the pits or whatever for the oxen, that they shouldn't get ruined. Al Kolpanim, what you see over here is that when it comes to this that was made in the middle of the orchard, this avanka over here, this was also only temporary. It was only that they can take off their garment or whatever, and then rest over there. It was only a temporary type of time to then get a shmira, to be shomer on those clothes or whatever that they were taking off. That is also only temporary. It's not for a residential purpose. Kari alai Reish Galusa, the Reish Galusa then said upon these chachamim that corrected Rava that it was a bit too late. Why didn't they do so earlier? Chachamim heimo lehora uleheitiv lo yado. These chachamim, they only knew originally to oiser, but they didn't realize in time to heitiv, to do good, and to find a heter for me to use the avarnka. They did not know only the next day when it was already too late. Says the Gemara weiter, quoting the Mishnah in the Seif of the Mishnah, Rabbi Eloi Shamati Rabbi Eliezer Vafilu Beis Kur. Rabbi Eloi says that I heard from Rabbi Eliezer that you can even have a non-residential karpef that is as large as a Beis Kur. Now a kur is 30 saw, so we're talking about 15 times larger than the base saw that we've been speaking about until now. Until now, we're talking about a base saw which is 5,000 square amos, and a base kur would be then 15 times as that would be 75,000 square amos. Masnisin deloy kechananya. The Mishnah that says that Rabbi Eloi heard this in the name of Rabbi Eliezer, that it can be up to a base kur, is not like Hananya, who learned differently what he heard from Rabbi Eliezer. Detanya, Hananya oimer. Hananya heard from Rabbi Eliezer, afilu hi arboim so ke'astartiya shel melech. It can even be 40 saw. A karpa for non-residential purposes can have an area being enclosed for up to 40 saw, even a greater size than what our Mishnah states that Rabbi Eloi heard from Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yochanan Ushnei Mikra Echad Darshan. Rabbi Yochanan says that they are both darshan the same pasuk, both Rabbi Eloi and Rabbi Chanina. Shneimar, it says in the pasuk, Vahi Yeshayahu lo yatsa chatzer hatichayna. And Yeshaya Hanavi did not leave the chutzner that was the middle of the chutzner. It's referring to over here a scenario where Yeshaya Hanavi was just coming from giving orders to Chizkiah Melech that he was coming in B'Shem Hashem, telling him that he was not going to live and he was going to die. Whereby Chizkiah Melech began crying, doing teshuvah and davening from the heart, from the depths of his heart. So it says that Yeshaya Navi did not leave even the middle chutzner when he was then being called back by Hashem, who accepted the teshuvah and the tefillah from Chizkiah to go back and tell him that he will live. Ksiv, it states in this pasuk that we just quoted from Yeshaya, it says, Gabi Yeshaya, it says, Ha'ir v'karina chatzir. The pasuk that we said says, Vahi Yeshayahu lo yatsa chatzir hatichayna. So it's read chatzir, but the ksiv is actually Ha'ir, the city. So the Gemara learns out, Mikan li istarti yashel melech. From here we see that the palace, the back area of the palace of the king, shayu ka'ayaras beinoinios, is like the back chutzner of the king is like the ayaros that are middle-sized regular ayaros. In other words, since the pasuk does not specify the size of the ear, so we're talking about an average ear. So what is considered to be the average ear is a machlekes. Marsav ayaros beinoinios having beis kur. One holds that the average, Rabbi Eloi says the average city is a beis kur, 30 saw. Umar Sover Mem Saw Havyon, whereas Chananya learns that it's 40 saw is the average ear, and that's the machlekes. V'Yeshayahu my boy Hasan. Now ask the Gemara, what was Yeshayahu, the Navi Yeshaya, doing in this middle chutzner, which is in the back of the palace? After all, if he was leaving the king's palace, why was he going in a back way? What was he doing there? Asked the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Bar Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan Melamed Shechola Chizkiya v'Holach Yeshayahu v'Hoy Yeshiva al Pischoi. Chizkiya Melech was sick, and after the nevuah that Yeshaya gave Chizkiya, he went to the back area of the palace, at the back chotzer, and he then situated a yeshiva, Talmidei Chachamim, to learn there in his zechus, to be shomer on him. Mikan leTalmid Chacham shecholim shemashivin yeshiva al pischoi. From here we learn out, if a Talmid Chacham is ill, then you should then make a yeshiva in the entranceway to where he is, as being a shmira for him. Says the Gemara Valav Milsi. However, this is not so, because Dilma Asi leIgurye Bei Satan. This could then cause a kitru. This would cause then to then fire up and get the Satan to be mekatreg. So better not to then do such a thing. Over here was a special situation that Yeshaya did so for Chizkiya Melech, because Chizkiya Melech had tremendous zechuyos.